Good evening, and I'm so glad you could come to this wonderful exhibition. My name is Diane Edison, and currently I'm the chair of drawing and painting at the University of Georgia in Athens. I received my BFA in New York City at the School of Visual Arts in 1976. I then went to California for a while, worked on my art, and then I received my MFA, which is the Master of Fine Arts from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And I've been creating art. Most of my works are on paper. I use color pencil, and I've been drawing and painting for over 30 years. And it was quite an honor to be invited here to judge this exhibition. And I'd just like to give you a sense of what went into this, because when you're asked to judge a show of this nature where it's random, it's unknowable. You don't know what a theme is, so you have to follow what the art is, and the theme becomes something as almost an afterthought. And the first piece I'd like to talk about is this wonderful quilt. Now, traditionally, people think of quilts as a functional item. It's something that's made and you use it, but this is a piece of art because it's so important not to think of fine arts and craft as being separate. They aren't separate. They're a means to an end. It's a vehicle for how you might want to make art. I chose this one. I saw it for the first time, and it just jumped out at me. Those concentric shapes, those rhythms, and the sense of color and the sense of nature. And in fact, what ends up happening when I look at this piece, it sort of talks about the whole show in general, and especially all the other pieces I'm going to tell you about that have won prizes. They are about concentric shapes, about telescoping perspective, and about the human eye and the eye contact and the viewer. Something you should know about me is that my art practice really evolved into making large-scale portraits. So, of course, this caught my eye, no pun intended. I was so drawn to this double focus of the eye, I couldn't turn my head away. It drew me in and it pulled me away. But it also talks to the whole issue of what do we mean when we make a portrait? What is the portrait of? What do you want the viewer to know? As I said, what you want the viewer to know is two things. I see you looking at me. I see you, you see me. And that's the connection when you're dealing with portraiture. Even if it's not a self-portrait, any portrait you make is a form of a self-portrait. And it takes a lot of nerve to expose yourself to the viewer's eye, because you're not judging yourself. You don't care what you look like, but there is the viewer being drawn to you for various reasons that have nothing to do, and you have no control whatsoever. What initially drew me into this image was that sense of tension, that sense of space being captured, and also the sense of texture. This is also not an easy image. It's like flesh being pulled and flesh being punctured, so that again, like similar images, it can repulse, but can also draw you in. I often say to my students, you want a reaction from the viewer. It doesn't matter whether they like it, hate it, or they want to run from it. It's a reaction. The thing you don't want is for them to look at it and say, I got it, and move on. I think perhaps this is probably one of the more interesting pieces. What we're talking about now is sound art. People don't think about that sound can carry art. But when you combine it with something, and I'm going to show you exactly how to make music with this piece, you literally roll it around and you get a sense of that tonal quality. And this is also a concentric piece, but it's a piece that's movable. It engages the viewer. In order to understand and feel this, you have to pick it up and you have to touch it. It's a tactile experience. It doesn't work without that. You've heard me describe the whole issue of the concentric shape. Now we're talking about the telescopic shape. In this particular picture, it's a photograph, which also feels very much like a painting. And in this case, you have the photographer outside looking through a window into a mirror of the barbershop. So he becomes part of the scene. But because he's outside and because you have a window outside, it becomes a case of deep space and shallow space. The deep space being what happens outside of the window, and the shallow spaces, you can almost be seated in this seat to get your hair cut. Now here we have one that combines both the concentric as well as the telescopic, and it's all about composition. As you look at this picture, the viewer comes into a scene of isolation, but this is how you enter the picture. You come in this way, you come out that way, and you're stopped. Even though this is an airy background, it's isolation. And the nature of high contrast, of course, what happens with that? It always comes forth in terms of how the viewer perceives an image. So when you have a hard edge, it puts you closer. This becomes on the frontal plane of the picture, which sends the sky really far back. This is such a full frontal portrait. And generally speaking, when people think of portraiture, they think of the commissioned piece where you want the person to paint you in a certain way, but this is someone who chose to make their portrait, which is a psychological portrait. You're drawn into the eyes. Even the slight lift of the glass on this side makes you know just how ordinary, how real this person is. And even the sense of how we deal with age in our country, there's a beauty to how this person is being dealt with. This portrait is so much about capturing the happiness of youth and the gentleness. There's a gentle spirit about this young man, and yet there's a power in the way that he's engaging you. It's not confrontational. It's allowing you to come in. The way that his locks create these wonderful shadows, and it creates drama around the eyes, but they're eyes that are looking. It's inviting. You can look at this person and not feel like there's going to be a tension. I have to say, this has been quite an enjoyable experience. When I first walked in, I realized, good gosh, this is going to be a hard task. There are too many good pieces. And I can assure you, of all the pieces we picked, there were many that did not make the cut that were just as good. When you think about creating a piece of work and you think about how someone is going to judge it, you judge the skill, you judge the craft. But then at the foremost, it is going to be a subjective choice. And that's what I had to contend with, how to pick the best work, but how to pick the best work that really showed how many things were done here, how many styles were being used. And I'd like to end on this note. Craft, fine arts, it's all about art practice. Neither one is a higher art, as some might say, or neither one of them is a fine art. They're all fine art. Thank you.